Hi, everyone. Today is Saturday, February 8th, 2025. I'm Jeffrey Morgan, and this is a talk I host twice a week to discuss my experiences on the path of soul transcendence. This offering is brought to you by the movement of spiritual inner awareness with the encouragement and support of my friend John Morton, who holds the mystical traveler consciousness, the spiritual consciousness that allows us to do the work that we're doing here today. If you're new to the call, the format is simple. We're going to start by calling ourselves forward into the light, which is calling our awareness forward into the light of God that's already present. And then we're going to chant three Anai hues. Hue is an ancient name for God, and Anai invokes a quality of empathy and compassion. Then I'm going to play a video clip from my teacher, John Roger, and then I'm going to do a reading from Kabir today. And then we can talk about whatever you would like. Um, so, I don't suppose Ron Holnick's on the call again, but I think if he's not, I'm gonna jump in and call us forward into the light. All right. Taking a deep breath, everyone. Beloved Father, Mother God, we call ourselves forward into your love and light and sound, the precious presence that you are, asking for the light of the Holy Spirit and the light of the Christ to fill, surround, and protect this gathering and everyone here, so that only that which is for the highest good will take place. We open ourselves at this time to receive of the guidance and the healing and the clearing of spirit. And we ask that any karma or negativity that can be lifted be taken into the highest realms of light and dispersed into the nothingness from which it came. We do this session in the presence and under the guidance of the mystical traveler consciousness. And we ask for this consciousness to be with us, guiding us and assisting us in our comings and our goings and all that we do. We ask that our presence be a celebration of the beloved, that we stand as pillars of light shining out into this level, igniting the fire in the hearts of millions, if not billions, in remembrance of who we truly are. We ask for a special blessing that all beings, sentient, seen or unseen, all across all of God's creation, be filled with loving joy and peace. And we ask for this peace that surpasses understanding to be the frequency by which we exist, that we would vibrate and harmonize in a great chorus of the Christ consciousness. We are so grateful for the blessing of service, that we continue to have opportunities to know you through serving ourselves and others. And we are so grateful for all the blessings that you bestow, for we know that the blessings already are. And we know that above all, your will is done. And so we again give our thanks. Berush Bishan.
Some people say, well, you say God, what does that mean? God means creativity and a mystical fulfillment for manifestation in the world. That's why the traveler comes present and works, is to bring forward the manifestation. As soon as you see it, yours starts. Then you find out. You look at yourself and you see that loving. You look at somebody else and you see that loving. And you say, I'm you and you're me and we're just one. And people say, who are you? And I say, I'm you and you're me. And they think, oh, how mundane. But behind it stands universe. Some people say, well, you say God, what does that mean? God means creativity and a mystical fulfillment. Self, you see that loving, you look at somebody else, you see that loving, you say, I'm you and you're me and we're just one. And people say, who are you? And I say, I'm you and you're me. And they think, oh, how mundane. But behind it stands universes of energy that's ours to open up and fill ourselves with, or to sit at the field of plenty and starve because we eat of our own garbage and the leftovers. We sit in the state of despair, poverty, because of, well, it was told to me, real simple. I said to my mother once, Mom, how come there's so many poor people around? She says, son, poor people have poor ways. Unloving people have unloving ways. If you have a depression in your life, you're living a depressing life. You understand what I'm doing? If you're living a life where there's no support, you're living a life that's not supporting you. Some people try to be very smart and use their intellect to get ahead. And then when the smarts run out and the intellect runs out, they fall. That's not the way to go about it. Use your smarts and your intellect to support you. So when they fall out, you're still present, standing there in the full direction, responsibility, integrity, vision, and enthusiasm.
Apologies for that. I tried reloading the page and apparently the player itself might have been the issue. Um, All right, I'll read. Um, all right, so I'm going to read a poem by Kabir. And luckily, since I'm reading live, there hopefully won't be as much interference as you just heard on the playback for the video, but at least you got the content. So, says Kabir, now what to fear? Now what to fear? Fear merged in fear. I know the secret of duality. Fears always afflicted me when I isolated you from me. One is he with the one who sees the inner outer as one. But brute is he who, led by delusion, makes low-high division. Freed from my eye, says Kabir, I saw God in all. All right. Um, I think you shared recently, Kevin. So let me just ask if other folks have you shared recently? We'll go with Ginny and Stacy to start.
Hi Jeffrey, it's Stacey, and well, Ginny's here, but it's me, Stacey, that'd like to share.
Okay.
Um, Hi. Just want to say thank you for these times. We're in the UK, so we can only, well, unless we get up in the middle of the night, can only do Saturdays. But I've been watching a lot of your recordings. I often take you to bed with me. And of late, and when I say of late, for quite a while now, um, my faith has been challenged. I've been challenged, and your talks have immensely helped. Um, I don't know if I have an articulated question, but I'd really love your support. Um, I've been dealing with pretty severe health challenges for nearly 5 years. Um, and I can't seem to physically get better despite doing a lot. And it's all been a result of the COVID infection. So I've got long COVID, but I've also had a lot of other health challenges, I think, as a result. So I've had some major surgery for a tumor sitting in my brachial plexus, and I've had my gallbladder removed, and I've had jaw surgery. Um, but every day I'm just mentally and physically really fatigued and just got a lot of physical pain in my body. And I guess my challenge is I've always been a really proactive person, and I've continued to be proactive during this journey, but I'm exhausted. I'm just completely worn out. But I want to get better. And I don't know how much of the go, go, go that I continue to try and have, but is just waning, is affecting me. And I just can't kind of find a balance. So even though I'm just so physically exhausted, I'm just always looking for the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And so yeah, I guess I'm just would love your light, would love your guidance of you don't necessarily give advice, and I don't necessarily need advice as, do this, go to this doctor or do this or do that, because I've had so much of that. Although I am willing, if you have something like that, I'm willing to listen. But I think really it's about how to get this balance between being so proactive and just being so like I just feel like there's no hope. Just have so much physical pain in my body. Um, and it's just affecting every area of my life now.
Mm.
So,
I have some perspectives.
okay.
I share some perspectives. Um, well, the first thing is it's human nature on a basic level, say basic self level, to measure success, measure value based based on physical comfort. So it's very natural for the consciousness to go, "Oh, I'm going through these physical pains. I need to fix that. That's a problem. And it must be that I'm not doing something right because I'm in pain." I'd say the somewhat inconvenient reality is sometimes pain is the curriculum. Pain is what we're to work with and what we're to learn from. And sometimes pain is simply a balancing action. It is, I guess, on the warning label. The traveler, when we get initiated or when we start working more actively, will wipe many, many slates clean or take, not wipe them clean, but take them on and fulfill them spiritually on all these 90% levels. But that still leaves our 10% level, what John Roger calls our 10% level, which is all the karmas and all the playlist of stuff we have to do in this lifetime. And in many cases, we will have decided that we're going to work with that teacher, with that spiritual consciousness before we even embody this lifetime. And so there's an agreement of what karmas, what debts, what learnings have to happen in order for it to be so that you leave the planet in one lifetime. And for some people, that means very devout, very health focused people, very proactive, very kind people go through a high degree of physical discomfort. And the crazy thing is, oftentimes, I mean, I've seen it happen with one person who was very close to me, and she was sick for years, just unable to get out of bed practically. And she had no idea what it was. So she would just work with it and continue to serve and continue to do the work of spirit. And then one day she found the right doctor at the right time and was like, "Oh yeah, it's this." Gave her some drops, and then a lot of the pain went away. Now there was a lot of like sensitivity that had built up over the time and a lot of worse for wears after that process. Now she could go back and go, "Oh, I wish that I'd found that doctor, and maybe if I'd done a little bit more research, I would have found that doctor." But that's not really how it works. You know, we as humans think that we have so much control that if we just make every right decision, we're going to have a comfortable outcome or the things that we like. Now, the reality is there is a overarching negative force, not negative as in bad, but just polarity wise, that's running all of this on a physical evolutionary level. It's not running our soul's destiny. That's now under the Christ. But there's a negative power down here that we could call Kal Niranjan, or in the Judeo-Christian context, and how it manifests in the lower levels, maybe you'd call it like a Lucifer. And that consciousness will give you all the comfort you want in exchange for process re-entering the process of evolution. So to a large extent, we want freedom more than we want our next breath. So part of what comes with that freedom is paying the price, which might be completing certain karmas in a certain way, which for all we know is might be the most graceful way to complete those karmas. It's astounding how many times I've come up against a situation and pitied myself, and then I realized how many different ways it could have actually been worse to pay the same karma, to pay the same debt. So it's important that we discipline the consciousness not to judge our value or judge our success or judge the value of our life or X, Y, and Z based upon how effective we are at achieving the comforts that we want. Whether that comfort is money, whether that comfort is physical health, we do the best we can with what we know, but ultimately, once after a certain point, our entire karmic field, our entire flow of learning, our entire flow of all of that is actually under a spiritual form called the mystical traveler consciousness. So, in a very real sense, whereas in previous manifestations and evolutions, our karma would have been potentially under a process of eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, constantly being tricked into a cycle over and over and over. We know that the things that we walk through when we're working with the mystical traveler are toward a higher purpose called get me off the planet, get me home to the ocean of love and mercy. So that's one thing to consider. The second thing to consider is that ultimately, when we make ourselves the doer, God says, okay, you're the doer, and then you have to hold the burden of all of that energetic and karmic responsibility. Now, you talked about being a go-getter. I, my perception is, or my experience is, when I identify with a karma as an identity, it's very difficult for me to gain altitude, and it's very difficult for me to see beyond that. Maybe a more accurate way to characterize it would say, I have a strong doer karma that comes in, and maybe the opportunity is allowing God to be the doer. So it's, and you talked before about losing faith or that process of faith. Well, it's funny because to a large extent, faith is just sort of a code word for compliance in most religions. But I think in the context of spirit, faith is more about surrender and being aware of the fact that God is breathing us. It's very difficult to be in a state of what John Roger calls faithing when we're busy being the doer and controlling. So you go, it's it's kind of like when someone's teaching a younger person like how to do something. Like if I was teaching my son how to do something, but every time he would do it wrong, I would just go in and grab it and go, no, 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 it has to be, and every time, and then at the end of it and go, I just don't know if I can trust you to do this. I don't know if I can trust you to handle that. Well, of course not. I didn't give him an opportunity to do it. How would I know if I don't give my son the opportunity to try it out, even if that means breaking something, or even if that at a certain point, if we've never really given God the chance to do through us, how can we have faith in God? We haven't left space for that. So what I came to understand, and there's a wonderful seminar, one of my absolute favorites called Opening Up and Allowing God to Do for Us. It's one of my absolute, like, people who talk to me would be like, oh, you always talk about that seminar, but I love that seminar. But it becomes less about, oh, I give my entire life to God, and it becomes more about those microscopic choices on a daily basis where we can either think that we're in control. It's like teaching someone to drive when you grab the wheel. You know, I did it on that set because you're in England, by the way. You're welcome. Um, but
I break for if I'm a passenger in the car, I break for people. That's how much of a over.
oh, oh,
This is
oh,
like you're so speaking to me. It's like this it's just yeah, the control. I'm such a doer. For everybody, for everything. This is so yeah,
yeah. So
I need
so
today.
but then it becomes what's the microscopic step today that would be you allowing God to do for you and allowing God to do for you through other people. I mean, there's that classic sort of joke or fable of the person who's sinking in a ship praying to God and then, somebody in a rowboat passes by and he goes, "Oh no, no, I'm waiting for God. No, 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 God, please, please, can you save me from this sinking ship?" And then somebody goes by in a helicopter and he goes, "No, no, 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 I'm waiting for God to save." And then finally he dies and goes before God, and God goes, "What are you doing?" He goes, "God, you didn't come and save me." He says, "What are you talking about? I sent a guy in a boat, I sent a guy in a helicopter, I sent an Olympic swimmer. What more do you want?" You know? And we condition the way that we receive as well in that. I mean that's a good joke. I would often describe it too as like we often wait for God to come through our front door when God may be knocking on the window or coming down the chimney like Santa Claus or even punching through a wall like the Kool-Aid Man. You wouldn't know about that reference because you're not from the US, but just don't ever drink that. It's a disgusting drink, but nonetheless. However God wants to enter my life through whomever and in what form, God is welcome. That's that's abundance consciousness. So there's an opportunity for all of us to ask ourselves, what's one, what's that next microscopic control that I'm willing to let go of today in order to hand it to God? And so it could just be one breath. I've been breathing from my chest and I've been forcing it from my chest, and I'm just going to do one where I just allow the air to fill me down into my toes. And I notice that I'm not the one breathing me, God's breathing me. It can be that simple. That's the breathing. And to a large extent, spiritual exercises, the meditation process, Simran, and all of that allows us, because as we start to lose ourselves into the sound current, the breathing has its own rhythm, and we seem to lose control of that. And so it's as if we're getting this profound demonstration. Not only we get to hear the sound of who we truly are, we also get to notice that we're not in control. And if you're like me, you fight for control, you fight for control, you fight for control, and then finally you let God do it, and then you go, "Well, thank God I'm not in control." It's a little like get away closer, right? That, and that control pattern that we're talking about can also affect romantic relationships because you'll want the closeness and then you'll want to stay in control. And there's some parts of intimacy that just can't happen without letting go of control. It's like jumping off a cliff. Not in a bad way, but like so you can fly. It's a scary thing to allow yourself to be seen. But you have to understand that some of the physical suffering and some of the issues that we see in the body and the tiredness that you're talking about might not be the doer making you tired. It might be everything you're trying to hold up around your image, your identity, your ego, your all the cognitive dissonance you have to maintain versus just letting the house of cards fall and going, well, this is what I'm like right now, and I love me. It is very tiring to try to be somebody. And it's very easy to just be the one that God loves in you. So you might take a look at your life. I mean, I work with a lot of people, and we start documenting and categorizing and writing all the different pieces, right? Of like what are they really like and what are their aptitudes and what's really natural for them and what's joyful for them. We write all that out. And then we write out all the things that they're doing in their life, and we notice they're very different. They're very different. And you go, wait a minute. Why are you trying to pretend like you're good at accounting? You're not good at accounting. Let that one go. Like, hire someone. What are you doing? It's astounding. And then it's like people are, oh my God, that's so wise. It's like, no, it's not wise. You just told me you're terrible at that. Why would you force yourself to do that? Hire somebody who's wakes up every morning and goes, I love accounting. You know, give them that opportunity to be joyful. Do you get it? So there's a little bit of common sense and humor if you really take a look at your life and go, how do I actually work? Because oftentimes people will judge themselves on the basis of some projected image from society, from your parents, from whoever the heck thinks they know you. And it gets us in this contorted, like I call it bonsai tree consciousness. It just stunts all the growth, and we're in all these different odd positions. And all we had to do was let ourselves grow and be the way that we are. You don't have to tell a seed how to become a tree. You don't. You just need to nurture it, love it, give it water, and it will grow in good soil. So you might take a look because that bonsai tree consciousness, where you emotionally insist that you fit a certain mold that you may or may not fit, can then be reflected in physical imbalances and blocks in the energy that can then lead to physical illness. And usually that stuntedness or that forced idea of who you think you are will also be reflected in the food choices you make and in the supplements you do or don't take. And all you really needed to do was to undo all the wires and let yourself be. Doing is a strategy by which we achieve an experience. What is the experience you're really looking for? And just be that right now. And if you're not experiencing that right now, what are the blocks that you've put in place? Because God is the source of all things, and you have that God essence in you. Therefore, every breath you take has the entirety of the experience you seek within it. It is just a question of whether we have blocked our receptivity to that experience.
Wow. I'm definitely going to be watching this on on the recording. You're coming to bed with me again. Jeffrey, this is amazing. There's part of me, I do need to play it back. I've written some things down, but there's so much that you've said that resonates. There's part of me feeling like petrified. Um,
That's good. Yeah, but that petrified interpretation, the petrified is just unfamiliarity at times.
yeah,
And you could also reframe that as excitement because it's the same energy.
yeah. No, I do, I agree. I agree.
And there's a lot of energy in there that you haven't even tapped through this. Please,
Mm.
please understand that when you finally unlock all of this blockage around who you think you should be, you'll realize just how much energy you invested in all of those ideas of you rather than in yourself. And you'll have more energy than you know what to do with. You'll be like, wow, I was doing all of that while also maintaining this idea of who I think I should be. What do I do with all of this energy? And then you start to move your body more. Your sleep starts to improve because the sleep will often be a place where you try to process what you weren't able to process during the day. So instead of having deeper sleep, meaningful night travels, maybe even some spiritual experiences, who knows, right? You end up just going back through the day and all the incompletes and the things that you blocked yourself from expressing so that you can express them. So then when if you were to wear like a sleep monitor, you'd be doing light sleep mostly. Any very small things would potentially wake you up, and you wouldn't have that depth of regeneration that your body craves. And you go, wait a minute, but I thought we were talking about emotions. I thought it's all connected. If you force yourself into a box, that energy needs to express somewhere, and it's going to wait until you're knocked out and you're not in the way. So you're knocked out, and then it starts processing and processing and processing. And then you sit down to do your spiritual exercises, and oh my God, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And then it's so hard to get in there. If you can start removing the blocks and just experience fully what you're experiencing and just make that okay. Doesn't mean you have to scream in people's faces, but at least admit to yourself, that pissed me off when that person did that, at least just be okay with the fullness of who you are. You can, if you can express, and it doesn't mean again like yelling in their face. It might be you take a run, or it might be you yell into a pillow, or it might be you do something to get the energy flowing. And it's not about right or wrong, it's not about good or bad, it's about energy that is seeking an outlet within a system. So if you can do that, you may find you sleep better. And as you sleep better, you may find there's greater chemical balance and greater movement and greater muscle regeneration. And you may find that your joints start to feel better because there's less inflammation because you have less cortisol. And then you may find it's just like everything starts to be connected to this one thing called loving yourself. People can create cancers. People can create organ failure through self-judgment and self-condemnation. I've seen it. I'm not saying you're doing that. I'm just saying your body is telling me a little bit of the, can you be nicer to you, please, so that I can be nicer to me, please, kind of thing.
It's hard to hear, but it's true, and I'm glad to hear it. And just thank you. Thank you so much.
God bless you.
Bless you too. You're amazing, Jeffrey. You really are. You're a gift. Thank you.
Well, the humanness in me is a lot to handle, but the spirit that comes through is definitely a gift. And it's a spirit that's available to you inside of you at any time. I'm just very good at not knowing what I'm doing and allowing God to do for me.
You're definitely a teacher to me right now. So thank you so much.
God
God
bless you.
bless you. Thank you.
Okay. Who hasn't shared in a long time? Oh, I guess all of us have shared. Okay, Kevin. Appreciate your honesty, by the way, because I don't have memory of these sessions. I can't hear you, Kevin, if you're talking.
Hey, Jeffrey, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Hey, cool. This is so amazing. Thank you for this, and the Traveler and the Christ is just like such a bright experience. I'm so grateful. Um, I want to talk about sex. I like I it seems to be one of my karmas in this life. When I was a kid, I was raised in a family that didn't talk about sex, and I felt shame around it. And I'm hearing some other stuff right now. Um, and then I came into life and I focused on spirit a lot. And I sort of got away from that. And then recently, I'm turning 65. And are you still there? I can't see you.
Yeah, I'm still there.
Okay, I'm turning 65, and I noticed that I still have shame around sex.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Um, and like one of the manifestations is like I don't, like my friends will say, "What are you doing?" I don't tell them I'm going on a date. I still have shame that I would want to have sex or that I do have sex. So in the Kabir thing that you read, it said the brute separates the high from the low, and that was this was on my mind, and I took that to be like, yeah, there's part of me that's still separating out that sex is bad, and so I wanted to ask you about, is there a function of shame around sex in the consciousness or in the spirit? Like, is there something I'm supposed to learn about that? And and then also I just remember that, or from what I've heard, I heard it a couple of times from Jared. Like he would tell like a body story, or I heard that he used to tell a lot of like dirty jokes, and I just think that's awesome. And like Ben Franklin, I heard did a lot of body, whatever they're called. There was a young lady from so and so kind of thing, which I just think is really cool and very freeing. But anyway, if you have stuff around that, and I just want to place that in the light for my uh, soul transcendence and my clearing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, in answer to your first question, there are kind of group karmas or collective unconscious psychic matrix in certain populations that will have shared beliefs and structures that act as a kind of control mechanism for their behavior. So I have seen that. So it may be that you remain accessed on a subconscious or unconscious level to a specific consciousness from the region that you were from. So that does happen. Beyond that, I mean, I think it was great that you caught that with the Kabir poem. The way I take it is, you know, one of the foundational, if not the foundational thoughts of ego is identity. I am. So I've often said that the first is to enter dualism. So we're in a non-dualistic consciousness. We're one with the ocean of love and mercy. And then the first step is to say, "Oh, I'm not. I'm this one, and that's the ocean of love and mercy." So that's the first is separation. Naturally, when we separate, the next step is to create hierarchies and to judge. We start to compare things.
yeah,
And, we can look at it as even in the levels, like if we're moving down, you have non-dualistic reality in the soul, and then you have kind of proto-awareness, proto like little pieces of consciousness appearing in the unconscious, very confusing. And then you start to see objects, individual objects. This object is not that object. You start naming things on the mental. Then on the causal, like causality, you start comparing things. And then on the astral, you start imagining things based on those comparisons called beliefs. And then on the physical, you start a war or a religion. But if you look at it, you're right. In non-dualistic reality, all of that becomes irrelevant. And you do have a quality in your consciousness of hierarchies and looking at who's higher, who's lower, who's in charge, who's right, who's wrong. And
yeah,
it's almost like in group dynamics, I'll often observe the whose fault is it process.
yeah,
Now, I don't know who decided at what point in human history somebody has to be at fault. But apparently that's a thing. And a lot of people really, well, but in many cases, the reason somebody has to be at fault is because a lot of people in the group will fault themselves. So they're looking for some signal to say that they don't have to do that.
right,
Now, if they were to get to a place where you go, well, I don't really need to fault myself or anyone, then it becomes irrelevant. It just becomes a question of how do we make this situation that we notice doesn't work better. And it doesn't really matter whose fault it is. It matters what are we doing right now.
right,
In the context of sex, like you're talking about, there's a few assumptions in the way that you described all of it. And I think it's useful for me to reflect those back to you to understand that there's a more nurturing way to relate to yourself. So the first is you identified with the behavior as a part of you. I feel guilty because I like sex. I've actually found, and this might just seem like semantics, But the way I structured in my consciousness is this one, this soul, this beingness is responsible for a basic self that likes sex this lifetime and has the pleasure of caring for that very sexual basic self and loving and nurturing that being while it completes that karma for me.
Mm,
Do you,
beautiful.
you see the difference?
Yeah.
And it's not, to me, it's like, okay, well, maybe it's just attitude, but attitude's kind of the whole game, really. I don't, what happens in very conservative environments, usually in religions, is people equate identity with behavior.
Yeah.
There's a difference between having an addictive pattern and being an addiction, right? It's like when somebody says, I am an alcoholic, that's different than saying, I'm expressing alcoholism right now, or I have an addiction pattern around alcohol that I'm working on clearing. Do you see the
Mm,
difference?
yes.
Or even in the context of religion, I have a tendency to bear false witness versus I have a pattern of bearing false witness versus I am a sinner. You see, as soon as you like, I am a sinner, that's a completely different energy.
Right. Right.
So part of this is you may be reinforcing the shame pattern in the way you describe your life to yourself. There was a really wonderful book I read called Magic Words about marketing. And in it, I read about just how phrasing something differently changes the way the consciousness relates to it. And I've talked
Yeah.
about this before. He talked about the scientific experiment where you had one group of kindergartners in one area and one group of kindergartners in another. And in the first group, they structured the direction as, would you please come help me clean up the classroom? And then the other group, they said, would you be a helper and come clean up the classroom?
Right.
And the second group was 40% more compliant.
Huh.
Think about that. Look at
Yeah.
identity politics. Like if I'm trying to get people to vote, is it more powerful to say, hey, can you guys please take time to vote? Or can you be a responsible citizen and cast your vote for me, please? You start to see how the way that we describe our life, there's somebody listening. And in your case, it would be the basic self. Like if you have a really strong basic self karma, that's just, it's not bad or good or right or wrong. It's just about ecology. It's like, how am I taking care of that? And if you have sexual energy, guess what? Sexual energy and creative energy aren't that different. So
Yeah.
it's like, do you want to go do an acting class? Do you want to do improv or do you want to have sex? It doesn't, the energy doesn't care. The karma doesn't care. Karma's like that as well. And it hit me that it's not personal. It is energy seeking its own completion. And it doesn't really care how you complete it. It's like if if the energy said, I need a spherical shaped object. Now you could get a baseball, you could get a globe, you could get a ball bearing, you just the list goes on. It doesn't care.
Hmm.
Most of our karmas are like that. So yours might be you have to process creative energy as part of an incomplete. You go,
Right.
well, the way that you prefer to process creative energy is on dates and with those folks. That's great. If that's what's working for you because maybe it gets you companionship, maybe it gets you kinesthetic support. So it's hitting other karmas as well. Maybe it gets you, it's like it's not right or wrong. It's about understanding the energies that seek to express themselves in the consciousness and then giving them an optimal expression that works for you. It's just about preference.
Yeah.
The whole shame pattern that you're talking about, you may also be misinterpreting. It may not be shame. It may actually be a kind of a playfulness in a sense. Like I don't want to tell the secret, or it's like, but it might even it might not even be about sex. It might be even at the level of like a kindergartner who doesn't want to tell that he's got a crush or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I identify with that. Yeah.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
it doesn't, our mind is going to oh, I must be ashamed. But when you start to look at things more energetically and spiritually and ecologically, and you don't have any judgment or interpretation on it, and you just go, oh wow, that energy's a lot. That energy is actually quite playful. I wouldn't say that I have a ton of shame about sex, but when I was a little kid, if there was crush going on, like if a girl had a crush on me or I had a crush, oh my God, it was like Fort Knox. I was like, don't tell anyone. Don't tell. I remember I think I was in college and I ran, Facebook was just super new at that point and I was like user number 200 or something like that.
Oh,
And,
wow.
and I remember getting contacted by somebody I went to kindergarten with. And I remember having a terrible time in kindergarten, you know. And we were kind of like we were going back and forth and kind of laughing and like telling stories about like hey, how come when we played house I always had to be the dog, that kind of thing. And somehow the women were all the other characters and the one dude had to be the dog, I guess. But then she basically told me because I'd have crushes and things like that, but I just thought that nobody liked me. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Every girl in the class had a crush on you. Every single one. And I had no idea. I was so in my stuff and so upset about the whole every single girl in the class had a crush on me. And it was silly. I mean, but I it's just funny. It's and we don't have to interpret it quite so negatively if we can just observe what it is without our
Yeah.
interpretive filter on it.
Yeah.
And so I think the more you can discipline the consciousness, because sometimes the negativity for you comes in reflection. It's not
Yeah.
at the point of action, it's when you look back and think you understand what you did, and then you judge what you did, and then you create beliefs about what you did, and then you hold them up to this. And I think you can kind of, nip that one. You just kind of go, wait a minute, wait a minute. Let me just take a look at what this actually was. And you go, oh, I didn't want to share because I was more like in the giggles because I had like, I don't, it's more playful in a sense. It's less about upset and more about
Yeah.
because I see that in
Exactly.
you. There is a playful part of you, and your basic self expresses a lot with that playfulness.
Exactly. And that's what I'm wanting. And I think part of the shame is that it's that part is sort of ashamed of the like adult, like, adultery is like it's like that base what I judge as the base part that doesn't
Yeah, the
include the
judgment
fun.
comes from the mind,
You
though.
know? Yeah,
But the
yeah,
judgment comes from the mind. I see. I've often described it as like caring for the garden of your consciousness. It's like if you were a gardener, do you judge how plants grow? Do you judge? No, you take care of them. You take care of those parts of you in a way that doesn't hurt anything else, you know?
yeah,
So it's like that, all the stuff, like you can clear trapped emotions, you can clear all kind of stuff from your body even about shame and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, there's a way that we can live where we don't even go there. And I'm not talking about like discipline or control. I'm talking about repatterning because you have a habitual pattern of activating reflection. And in that reflection, you judge. And in that judgment, you create beliefs and shame and all that other stuff.
right.
I'm saying if you pass into action of self-care instead of going into reflection and paralysis analysis of your behavior, you may find that you can start to repattern it because at this point, it's just habit. You've just got habit going. And then if you really want to clear the habit, I would not try and fix it. I would understand what the habit was put in place for in the first place. And it can be the strangest things. I mean, sometimes negative behaviors that I've had were because somebody in my family had a negative behavior that way, and I wanted closeness to them, and I thought the only
Mm,
way to have closeness was to adopt the same behavior.
wow.
So what I really sought was closeness.
Yeah.
And I go, and then I kind of go, well, I can do the closeness thing anyway. And then I go to that person inside of me and start to have a very close experience in that connection. And then all of a sudden, that program that I set up, that strategy, is no longer needed and it just dissolves. But do you understand? See, there's a way that you can work with your consciousness where you don't have to be a victim to it and you don't have to judge it.
Mm,
You can just look at it as a beautiful system of beautiful energy and just figure out how to make that thing sing, how to make that thing hum.
mm,
You see, that's why I mean I'm doing that class with Paul around spiritual alchemy. That is the principle. It's just looking at all the parts of consciousness as these beautiful elements in dynamic relation, dancing together. And all you're doing is recognizing stuff that might be out of rhythm or out of sync and kind of tuning it and harmonizing it till that thing is like a beautiful orchestra.
mm.
I mean, I look at it very much as like clearing is sometimes just tuning the instrument.
Yeah. It's beautiful, man. I really I'm so grateful, and God bless us all. I don't know what else to say. Thank you so much. Um,
God
God
bless you.
bless me.
Yeah, God bless us all.
Yeah,
Let's take a moment. Thank you, Lord, for this hilarious and entertaining us.
exactly. Have a good day, everybody.
Well, it's 9 a.m. God bless you. I love you. Peace be still. The blessings already are. I'm gonna jump to my next meeting. Thank you.